All right, guys. Today we're going to start talking about this biochemical process called photosynthesis, which obviously you're very much aware of because we studied this in Year 11 biology last year. We are going to go into quite a bit more detail in Year 12, so I need you to really hang on with me because it's a bit of a bitch, this process, putting it lightly. It can get quite complicated. The level that you need to know in Year 12 luckily has been scaled back from, for example, when Mr. Mallow did Year 12 biology, all right? But it can still be a bit of a headache, so we really just need to really break down the process and look at it as a whole. Today we're not going to look at the really tough stuff of the process, we'll do it in class, all right? We're going to look at more about why photosynthesis happens and where it happens, okay? So here we know plants eat sunlight, right? Okay. Pause the video here, have a go at 3 quick questions. All right, so hopefully for this first one, it says, explain using a graph what effect do enzymes have on the activation energy of reactions. We're going to look at that famous graph, which sort of looks like this, right? So we have a reaction here, right? And hopefully you can see that the activation energy of the reaction is the point from up here, right, because we have up there, all the way down to here, right? That's the amount of energy that needs to be inputted the reaction for it to happen. What does an enzyme do? An enzyme, right, this ticked little line here, lowers that activation energy. So now we only need that much energy, okay? Doesn't seem like a lot, but that lowered of the activation energy means the reaction can actually happen inside of our bodies, for example. All right, number 2 says, draw the phospholipid bilayer. So let's start that. Drawing the phospholipid bilayer. And we want to label which end is hydrophilic, which one is hydrophobic. So hydrophilic and hydrophobic. Cool. And then the same here, we'd have hydrophobic, and then this outside the head would also be hydrophilic, right? Okay. We know that because outside of a cell and inside of a cell there's water, but in the middle of the membrane there's actually no water there. Okay. What is the role of the methylated cap and the poly A tail for the completed mRNA molecule? We're talking about the mature mRNA molecule. So if we have a mature mRNA here, right, we're going to have a poly A tail, so lots and lots of adenines are going to be added to there, right? And a methylated cap, so we're going to have methyl cap there. All right, their role is for protection, right? We don't want, there's lots of enzymes and stuff inside our bodies. We don't want those enzymes eating away at the mRNA. So these 2 things will protect that from happening. All right, so in the study design, we're going to look at photosynthesis, obviously the purpose of photosynthesis, but also the chloroplast, which we should know is an organelle, is the site of photosynthesis and an overview of their structure, and what we call the evidence of their bacterial origins, which is probably one of the coolest parts of biology, I think, personally. So let's look at the sun, okay? The sun, the Earth's source of free energy, okay? So heterotrophs, like you and me, actually get our energy, glucose, from other organisms. So, for example, by eating plants or animals. Okay, photoautotrophs, on the other hand, photo meaning light, auto meaning producing their own trophs energy, actually get their energy from the radiant energy from the sun. Okay, so here we have the sun doing its job, which is providing energy. Okay, so plants get this sunlight and use it to undergo that process we call photosynthesis, okay? And just a little overview, we're not going to go into this too much detail, but the equation for photosynthesis is in the presence of sunlight and the pigment chlorophyll, that's why we put it on top of the arrow, we have 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 12 water molecules, becoming 1 molecule of glucose, and there's our energy. Okay, 6 molecules of water and 6 molecules of oxygen. They're just byproducts we don't actually need. Okay, notice though I've put water on both sides, and that's going to be really important later on. So why photosynthesize? Okay, so although it may seem like plants are doing us a favor by producing glucose, which we eat, and releasing oxygen, which we breathe in, they're actually really selfish. Okay, they do this biochemical pathway just for their own benefit. All right, so what does that look like is mainly in that through that process of photosynthesis, which we can see here, we're producing a carbohydrate, glucose, which is later going to be used in cellular respiration, which we're going to look at later. Okay? So now let's look at where this happens, where the photosynthesis happens, the chloroplast. So this is a chloroplast under an electron micrograph. Okay? So here we can see the structure there. Right? Electron micrographs are really great because we can actually see in detail the little structures inside the chloroplast. Let's look at a diagram though, because it's easier to actually make out things. So it's important for you to understand the actual structures inside of a chloroplast. So the chloroplast is made up of two membranes, an outer membrane and an inner membrane. Okay. Inside of the chloroplast, we've got a liquid. It's very similar to the cytoplasm. We call that liquid the stroma. Okay. And then we've actually got these membranes. Okay. And we call these membranes granum. Okay. And so this is a granum here. Right. And the granum are actually made up of little smaller membranes that are stacked up. And we call them the thylakoid membranes. Okay. Different processes of photosynthesis happens in different places in the chloroplast. We'll go through that in more detail later on when we talk about those actual processes. Really important, you should be able to draw a simple chloroplast, okay? Another little key thing to notice is that chloroplasts have these things, DNA, and they have ribosomes. If you were to think, why would that be important? Hopefully you can work out that if a chloroplast has DNA and ribosomes, chloroplasts have the capacity to produce their own proteins, which is a pretty cool thing and really important when we're talking about this, the evidence of the bacterial origins of chloroplasts. All right, it's actually been proposed by many scientists around the world that chloroplasts were actually once free-roaming bacteria that were able to undergo this photosynthesis process themselves. They survived in the world by converting sunlight into glucose. Okay. One day, though, a big eukaryotic cell, a big complex cell, actually swallowed up a chloroplast. Okay. A chloroplast bacteria, okay? But instead of breaking it down and eating it, this cell actually, for some reason, decided to actually take on that chloroplast, right? And now that is how we think that eukaryotic plant cells have actually now gained the ability to use chloroplasts to undergo photosynthesis. They've developed what we call an endosymbiotic relationship with that bacterial chloroplast. So now cells actually in plants develop chloroplasts from a seed, which is a bit mind-blowing. That imagine if one day you were walking down the street and you found a certain animal which you thought, hey, that animal, that could be useful, a bird, for example, and you ate up that bird and then it gave you wings. This is sort of what happened, which is a little bit mind-blowing if you ask me. But you really have to know the different forms of evidence that we have for this, okay? The one and strongest piece of evidence that I think, in my personal opinion, is that chloroplasts have their own circular DNA, just like bacteria, and they have their own ribosomes. And the circular DNA and ribosomes together can be used to produce their own proteins for the cell. And these are the proteins for the process of photosynthesis. Another piece of evidence is that chloroplasts have both an inner and an outer membrane. So this is evidence of both that membrane that was originally of the eukaryotic cell when it was engulfed and the original membrane of the chloroplast, okay? And then lastly, chloroplasts themselves are actually quite similar in size and in shape to some very large bacteria.